Hey everybody, this is Joe.
And this is Jenna.
From Fantastic Reviews. Gotham is back from its winter break this week. I saw the return episode.
I did not.
And the question is, should we care to keep watching?
I vote no.
Why do you vote no?
I really had high hopes for Gotham when it first came out. They do character progression very well, but they don't do character and story progression very well at the same time. I feel like Gotham has really devolved into so many things are happening that I can't care about any one thing anymore. We've got a gang war, now we've got supervillains, then we have a runaway Bruce Wayne lookalike, and now there's the Court of Owls, and I don't know what to focus on because none of it matters. When they do their individual episodes focusing on like one particular villain, they do a great job because you get that character development, you get emotionally invested in it. But then when they take that away and you're just focusing on so much is happening that you really disconnect from the show, at least in my opinion.
I agree. This the first episode of After This Break is following the Riddler in the post-Penguin fallout. We saw him kind of start to lose it during last season after he finds out that Penguin killed his girlfriend.
I was so hoping for that bromance. I'm so mad that it didn't happen. Disappointed.
So now is the consequences of everything that's happened. And we're seeing him start to break down. We're seeing him start to question himself, saying, hey, you know, I know who I am, but I'm not that person yet. How do I get there? And that's kind of what he's struggling with and kind of what he's dealing with. And he's got a lot of questions going on in his crazy little head.
And I feel like that's kind of been his character the entire time. He's always been struggling to find his place and to find who he is. And every time he thinks he's found his place, something knocks him back down. But how is that going to fit into the rest of the overall story? And that's really, for me, where Gotham just breaks down. Because what's the story?
To be honest with you, Gotham should have been like this episode the entire time. Because it's mostly following the Riddler story at this point. We're focusing on just one villain, on one character, on one story arc. And there is the Court of Owls / Bruce Wayne lookalike kind of going on in the background, which I feel was completely unnecessary. It takes you completely out of this episode altogether.
And I feel like that's another knock against Gotham is that we don't need the Bruce Wayne storyline. I do not care about Bruce Wayne in this fashion. I don't care. Now we have the Court of Owls involved, and suddenly you've got this big, scary shadow agency in the background that had no footing in the series up to this point. It was just suddenly, hey, look at this new thing we have. And there was no build-up, I feel. There was no big reveal at the end. If you know the comics, you knew who they were. And if you didn't know the comics, it was just, who the fuck are you people? And then it had no payoff for anybody.
The problem is Gotham is trying to do too much in too little of amount of time.
Yep.
And that's really what we're seeing. The first season was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was great. There was a little too much Bruce Wayne in it for me, but I understand that, you know, there is no Gotham without Batman. There is no Batman without Bruce Wayne. And there is no Bruce Wayne without the tragic parents getting shot in the alley story, which we've seen a million times.
I feel like we could have jumped in at the point after his parents were shot, and he was just, if we had to have Bruce Wayne involved at all, it could have just been after all that happened, when he's on his dark, angsty journey through his teenage years. We didn't have to see them get shot. But as they introduced Jim Gordon, that's fine. Like, they did it well, but everything else with Bruce Wayne, I feel like, has just... It's been unimportant and irrelevant the entire time. Too many adults treat this kid like he's an adult, and he is not. Seriously, Alfred, send him to his goddamn room. Like, I don't know what else to tell you.
But the first season started out really strong because we got to see a lot of the interactions with the GCPD. Mm-hmm. And on the flip side of things, we saw a lot of the interactions in the underworld and you know, the mob bosses and the corruption going on in the city. From there, it kind of branched off. Second season also turned out really good because it was kind of like the rise of the Penguin, how he came to power, and how he became one of the major players in Gotham.
And you still had all those connections back to the first season. You can do connections really well when you have a mob mentality going into the show. You have cops versus the mob. Okay, what are the connections with the cops with each other? What's their connection to this criminal entity? What are those criminals' connections to each other? You can branch out from there. And that worked really well with that first season and into the second season.
But it seemed like everything started really going downhill once they introduced the Indian Hill storyline, where Dr. Hugo Strange kind of doctored
everything.
All of the villains in Gotham. We saw Poison Ivy go from a 8-year-old girl to like a, I don't know, 20-year-old woman. And,
unnecessary.
And like just suddenly became over-sexualized. Like, you still have the mentality of an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, really? Like, that's not necessary.
And she really seemed not at all concerned about it either. She was just like, okay, there was nothing in between that. I don't know how that even happened.
Now, don't get me wrong. Some of the deviations from the original stories are okay the way they've been written them in.
Yeah.
Like with Penguin, you didn't really see much of the Wayne Cobblepot relationship there, but that's okay because Penguin went on a different path. Though the end is still kind of the same because he's still running mob boss stuff in Gotham.
Riddler's backstory is also different, and that's completely fine because, again, they did his character very well. They did his character justice as they wrote him in the show. You don't have to follow the comics. You can do something completely different. You can pick and choose things in the comics that you want to do, and that's completely fine. But it becomes cumbersome when you just start throwing everything together because you feel like you need to rush through something.
And the problem with Indian Hill is that it created this connection between all the villains when there really didn't need to be any at all.
I personally didn't feel like Hugo Strange needed to be involved at all. It was another unnecessary character, I felt. He didn't really add anything to it aside from being the head of Indian Hill. And then we get from him the Court of Owls connection, which is just another connection that didn't necessarily have to be. The Court of Owls isn't supposed to be this shadow agency that everyone knows. It's supposed to be something that works in the background that everyone fears because it's a legend.
And that's fine if you want to introduce the Court of Owls, but it should have been done in a completely different way rather than just outing them right away. I mean, you could have kept it a mysterious, overseeing organization that's pulling the strings of everything in Gotham without referring to them by name, without even showing any of their faces or any of their trademarks.
Right.
It didn't need to be done. The other part of it, too, is when you have Jerome in the original storyline. He got killed. My opinion is she should have stayed dead altogether.
I was fine with him coming back to life because I really liked his character. Whether or not he actually turns out to be the Joker, which at this point it'd be weird if he wasn't the Joker, but if he didn't turn out to be the Joker, I just thought he was phenomenal in the role, and I feel like that particular role brought so much more to the story than we had previously.
But in bringing him back to life, they really tried to rush their connection to the comics by having the guy say, oh my god, he's not coming back to life. Well, they don't really need to see him, they just need to see his face. Let me cut his face off. An obvious reference to the New 52 storyline where Joker's face was cut off.
Yeah.
Didn't need to happen.
Nope.
Did not need that at all.
Nope. I get it, Gotham. I get that you're trying to please new fans and that you're trying to keep fans of the comics involved. But you're doing it in such a heavy-handed way that you're alienating everyone. That's my personal opinion. Everyone else who watches the show could have a completely opposite opinion and think it's wonderful. Personally, for me, I feel like it's just alienating everyone. You're trying to throw Easter eggs, you're trying to throw all these connections together, and none of it is making any sense. It's just all such a mess now.
The city of Gotham has basically just become a giant high school where everybody knew each other and nobody ever left.
The 10-year reunion really was really disappointing. Everyone came back because no one left. And,
so the question becomes, can Gotham fix these problems and can they get people interested in watching again?
From what I've heard and seen, I don't think it's happening anytime soon. If they had stayed where they were in the first season and a half, I think they would have done a really great job. Focus on one character at a time, introduce other characters as they come. Don't just start forcing people to do things. And maybe introduce some new characters. I mean, I liked the addition of Fish Mooney. She was not in the comics at all that I'm aware of, unless she's a minor character in the background of a panel somewhere. I thought that was a great introduction, and it helped you get into the Falcone crime syndicate without actually having to be part of the Falcone crime syndicate. So I thought that was really great. It really gave the Penguin a chance to grow, and you got to see his manipulations behind everything as to the crime boss he would eventually become.
Because the problem is, each of these characters that we've been introduced to, if you've read any of the comics, if you've watched any, even the animated series, you know where these characters are going. You know what's going to happen to them. You know that they're still going to be around.
Right. Penguin got shot in the episode right before this one. He fell into the river. He's either going to bleed to death or drown, and we know neither one of those things is going to happen. We know that. Because he's going to come back, because he's going to bother Batman. So you need to introduce new characters. You need to introduce new stories. You need to do something that's not connected so much that whatever you do, it doesn't matter. You can shoot the Penguin 14 times. We know he's coming back. You can blow up Riddler or whatever you want to do, and we know he survived somehow. So there's no consequence to anything that happens with these characters. There's no consequence for Bruce Wayne. There's no consequence for Jim Gordon. Even the Court of Owls, we know, really isn't going to go anywhere. So all of this is doing is just stagnating and waiting for characters to grow up to do something cool. And they're trying to force that in now when nothing can be done.
Which is why, in my opinion, the show should stick to the main characters. Even Bruce Wayne doesn't really need to be in it this much at that point. I mean, you can have a storyline where he's continuing to maybe investigate his parents' death or investigate the shady dealings going on at
Wayne Enterprises.
Wayne Enterprises. But he doesn't really need to be in it that much because it's more about the city of Gotham rather than the story of Bruce Wayne.
Right.
We all know what happens to Bruce Wayne. He goes away, he trains with ninjas, and he comes back as Batman. We know that.
Yeah. So
we don't really need to follow Bruce Wayne's story at all.
Right.
Because we know that too much. What we should be focusing on is Jim Gordon's rise through the GCPD. And we can focus on the major villains becoming who they are. Like, we saw the progression with Penguin. We saw the progression with Riddler. And we kind of saw how they started getting twisted and turned. And, how they just slowly started losing their grip on sanity and reality to become who they are going to be.
Right. And you can do that with other major characters that you might introduce slowly along the way. You can keep Selina. She's got a great character that you can show the progression through. But do we need all these other fringe characters out there? Do we need all these other shady organizations that really seem to be hindering the show? I say no. If you go back to just doing one character at a time, let them interact with each other as needed, but focus on the story, focus on the overall experience of the show rather than what more can I add to it. You don't need to add anything else. You had a great show to begin with. They're focusing so much on Bruce, we're not getting the stories we want to see. We're not getting the Riddler stories. We're not getting the Penguin stories. We're not seeing Jim Gordon do anything, really, other than react to what's happening because of Bruce Wayne. And then if we are seeing that, it's going in parallel with the Bruce Wayne story that's happening every 5 minutes in the show. We're cutting to Jim Gordon. We're cutting to the mob bosses. We're cutting to Bruce Wayne. We don't need all that. Focus on one thing, Gotham. Even if it's just for one episode. Do a nice, tight episode, and then the next episode you can go focus on Bruce and whatever shenanigans he's getting into. And then the next episode you can focus on, what's happening with the mob bosses now. And then you can bring Jim in because he's obviously a police officer and he's investigating it. We don't need all these things happening at once. I feel like it's a cutscene episode of Family Guy. We just keep flashing back to that stupid chicken, and it just takes away from the story. It takes away from the show, and I know that I'm going to watch a stupid kid for 10 minutes try to be an adult, and he's not. And everyone is just letting him do that, and it's so annoying.
The way this return episode went was, I feel how most of the rest of the season should go. The problem, though, is that the interludes with Bruce Wayne and the Court of Owls and the Bruce Wayne lookalike,
who should be Thomas Elliot, who isn't Thomas
Elliot. It stops the show dead. And by the way, if you are going to do a Thomas Elliot story, made Thomas Elliot the friend of Bruce Wayne when they were growing up, so there's actually meaning behind it rather than, oh, I'm just a lab experiment, and oh, guess I look like you, so I'm gonna take your life now.
Yeah.
That's dumb.
The character has no... He doesn't even have any emotion behind it.
There's no depth.
Reasoning. There's nothing other than, oh, I guess this is what I'm doing today, and that's it. They tried to with Selina. They tried to give him something that he wanted of Bruce Wayne's, which was his connection to Selina. But that fell apart rather quickly.
So what it comes down to is, are we still going to watch it? I might, because I'm into the Riddler story. I like what they're doing with it, and it's a heartbreakingly beautiful story, what they're doing with this character. I could definitely do without the Bruce Wayne interludes.
Yep.
So it's probably worth it to watch it for the rest of Riddler's story, but I'll tell you, Gotham, you're on thin ice, buddy.
You've already lost me. I have left the ice to go get hot chocolate, and I am not coming back. We'll see what he says later, and maybe I'll binge watch the episodes in order, because maybe part of the problem is it's being drug out for 22 episodes when it doesn't need to be. I hate that. It takes 22 freaking episodes to get an answer to something, and I have to wait every other week for it, and then there's a month-and-a-half long break. Now why do I care?
Are you guys still watching Gotham? What do you think of our opinions? Do you agree? Do you disagree? How do you feel the series is going so far? Do you think it can be improved on, or do you like it the way it is?
Yeah, you can disagree with us. That's completely fine. We know our opinions are our opinions, and everyone else has a different one. So please feel free to let us know all of the things we said that were wrong.
Let us know in the comments below what you think. Like the video if you like what we talk about. Subscribe to our channel to get reviews like this and others coming up.
Yep. And make sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We are also usually amongst those different social networking things.
Well, that'll do it for us. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye, Internet.